Hello, I'm your host, Charmaine, and welcome to Beautiful Gems.
This is operator 619 calling for Charmaine Thompson. Do you accept the charges?
Yes.
Hey, Charmaine.
Hi, MarQuis. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, operator.
No, thank you.
I'm great, Charmaine. I'm so glad that I finally get a chance to talk to you. It's been so long.
I am so happy that you took the time to give me a call. I really appreciate you. So I'm thinking that we can actually do a three-way call.
Oh, okay.
To patch in our fellow miner.
Well, let's call up the operator and see if we can get that done.
Okay.
Oh. Operator, we'd like to patch in Miner. Can we do that?
Yes, please hold.
Miner, are you on the line?
Hi there.
Operator, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Miner. I'm here with Charmaine. How are you?
Oh my goodness. It's so nice to have you both on the call today. So thanks for joining, fellow miner.
Thank you.
All right. So I asked the fellow miner to hop on with us because I'd really love the fellow miner to get to know you personally. And just to give our fellow miners a little background, I first met MarQuis a few years ago at work, and we hit it off, and we've been, friends ever since. And I'm happy to say also, too, that he has a show of his own in which I was I the first guest?
Actually, I think you were the first guest. So the first two episodes were with Paul, my ex-best friend, and then you were my first guest. Yes.
Yes.
And I was so nervous. I was very nervous. So the fact that you have this under your belt is fantastic. And you're, 2 seasons in now? You're almost about to pass me.
Oh, goodness. But yeah, right? I was your first guest on the show.
First guest. And it's such a great experience. And it really taught me a lot about my communication style, being very clear and intentional with what I want to say and how I want to say it. And you, as you already know, we talked about this many times, you're so intuitive. And I don't know if that's something that is self-taught or if it's sort of baked into your DNA. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, it's probably a bit of both. It's baked into the DNA, like you just said, but it takes practice, right? You got to listen to it. So yeah, intuitively, I think, I knew that we were going to hit it off. And so, I'm just very grateful to know you. And I know that we have had so many great conversations. Oh, my goodness.
Very personal.
Yes.
Very personal.
Yes. And I know that one of the things that I learned about you is that you're very introspective, which intrigued me because, I'll be honest, most of the time, guys don't really open up about those type of things. And you did. And I learned so much from you and your thought process and, just getting a man's perspective about things. So, I found you to be very genuine, an authentic person, very caring, intuitive yourself. And I just love for you to share, some of those inner workings, some of the things that you've learned along the way on your personal journey. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'd love it. I'm wondering, there's so much, and I know we have so little time. I'm a talker. I'm wondering where I should start, but I do want to say one thing before we go in a particular direction. One of the things that you mentioned just now was about getting a male perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the places that I go to when I start being introspective, one of the places, I go to many, but one of them is, how do I say this? It's about being a Black male versus being a male.
Mhm.
And it's not even verses, but sometimes there are things that are specific to being a Black male that cause a different level of introspection
Mhm.
than it is about being a male that
Yes.
cause a different it's a different road, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes. Yes, it
Um,
does.
and so it just struck me where I'm like, I wonder if she values my opinion or my thoughts from a Black male perspective
Correct.
or a male perspective or both. I mean, I assume it's both, but
It's both, but I want to say specifically a Black male perspective
Hmm.
because it is unique. And
Yeah.
it's the same for Black women. It is unique. It adds an extra layer. And so I really think that, our fellow miner would be interested in that. And, the way that, we've spoken about it has been when you are either an ally to yourself in this process, you're an enemy to yourself in the process, or a frenemy, which is interesting,
Mm.
or unbothered.
Mm. Well, so as you say, we've talked about this many times, and it's so, what's the word that I'm looking for? When you frame it in those four lanes, it gives it shape and it gives it name and form.
Mhm.
And sometimes, and before I go into each of those, but sometimes in my introspection, it gets to such a dark place because I can't name the thing. I can't figure out if I'm being an ally or a frenemy,
Oh,
if
wow.
I'm being an enemy or if I'm unbothered. So if I name it, does that make
Yeah,
sense? The
yeah,
emotions
yes.
get so they don't have a touch to them. So when you name it,
Right.
then you say, okay, this is what it is. This is what I'm doing in this moment. So
Yeah.
I love that. I love those four frames that they sort of provide a foundation for a lot of the introspection. Absolutely.
I'm glad to hear that. And
Yeah.
so, what I would ask you is, which one would you start with first?
I'm going to start with the one that I am most, because I'm going to go deep and then I'm going to dig myself back out as a miner would.
Okay.
Um, I'm going to go all the way down into the coal mine and then I'm going to come out. Um, doesn't always work that way, but they have elevator shafts, so we'll go all the way to the bottom floor.
They sure do.
Bottom floor is I am probably, and I think there's an expression that goes like this, but I'm my own worst enemy.
Mm,
It's the enemy that I find myself being the most when I'm doing my introspection.
mm.
My extrospection, if that's a word, when I'm doing for others to the outside, I'm being an ally most times.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'm a frenemy, right? Depending on the situation. But I'm the enemy to myself. And sometimes I'm unbothered to the outside world. Very sometimes I'm just like outside world. I'm
Sometimes we
unbothered.
need to be.
Yeah,
Sometimes we
that's
need
true.
to be. Yeah.
That's true. For me, I'm gonna start with my with being an enemy when I'm doing my introspection. And it looks like this. I'm gonna give an example to our fellow miners out there who hopefully can identify with this,
Mhm.
because part of the introspection is also being alone, feeling alone when you're so inside of it. So it's nice to share this. Thank you, Charmaine, for providing this space. So when I'm an enemy to myself, here's an example. There was an instance in the not too distant past where a friend of mine and I parted ways, and when a thing like that happens, particularly when it's a good friend, it can throw you for a tizzy. And it threw me into a place of introspection. And the very first question I asked was, can I be a better friend?
Mm.
How could I have been a better friend to this person? Why did this happen? Right? First, you ask the why. Then I start to look inward. How could I have been a better friend to this person? Right? Then the next level, as I try to, as you dig deeper into the introspection, is when is the other shoe going to drop? If I wasn't a good friend to this one of my very best friends, how could I possibly be a good friend to anybody else in my life? Am I a good friend
Wow.
to anybody, or are they just faking it? And then it just gets worse, and it gets like, well, if I'm not a good friend, then what the hell am I out here doing? Right? You get into this, what am I worth? It's a thing of self-worth. And the thing about that is that it's being your own enemy, because you don't need that.
No.
And at the end of the day, at your core, when you dig yourself out of that particular lane of introspection, it's about self-love. You gotta love yourself, and you can't attach something else that happened with a friend to what's going on inside of you. If you're a good friend, if you feel like you're a good friend, then you're probably a good friend. If nobody else in your life is saying, "Hey, you know what, you're a bad friend," now there are instances where you can behave like a bad friend, right? You may have done that thing and it was not the best thing a friend could do, but are you a bad friend in general? Probably not, right?
Right.
So it's about self-love, right? But that introspection enemy, right? When I'm in my own enemy, I say, look at who I am, and look at what I've done to what a lovely person who was my friend for many, many years. So that's probably a good example. Another good example of being an enemy to yourself, and then I'll move on to another one. You lose your job, right? And that this happened to me. That's probably happened to some of our fellow miners out there. You lose your job, and I got in my own way. Not well, yeah. I got in my own way because of two things, and I was my own enemy because of two things. One, there was a time when I had an attitude about it. Well, yeah, like if they don't want me, then I don't want to be working, right? Then
that sounds like a black person in general.
Well, if they don't want me, then I don't want to be working.
Neck
right?
rolling and everything. Yeah,
and all this attitude, and it comes off, right?
It does.
So then I would go to an interview, and the people would say, "Well, why do you want to work here?" And I'd be like, "Well, why do you want me?" All this, right? Now you're being an enemy to yourself, because you're not going to get that job with all that attitude. You're getting in your own way. Right. Good day to you. Thank you for your time. We're going to put your application at the bottom of the list. So, there was a time when I was my own enemy because I had too much attitude. I attached too much past angst with the past situation to future opportunities, and that's being an enemy to yourself. You can't think that because one time you got screwed over, for lack of a better term, with one person, that it's going to happen with the next.
I like that.
Because you're your own enemy. So that's another example. So I started with that one. Being a frenemy to myself. This is a little bit more complex, and I do this too. I do this almost as much as I'm my own enemy. I'm my own frenemy. The very best example, our fellow miners will probably find this ironic and funny. The very best example of being my own frenemy is doing introspection itself. Because when I'm doing the introspection, right, it's over and being overly introspective. I can't and it's a practice of mine, so much so that it sometimes gets in the way of enjoying a moment, right? So here's an example. For my fellow miners out there, I'm an actor, right? I appear in plays and various things in my area, and I could be getting a standing ovation, hands holding my fellow cast members, should be enjoying all of my flowers, and I will look into an audience and not see someone who I thought was going to be there that night. And then I start being introspective. I say, look at all the praise that I'm getting. And it becomes a frenemy situation. Look at all the praise. Look at all the accolades. You deserve this. And in that same moment, these people are strangers. Why isn't my friend who said they were going to be in the audience? Why aren't they here?
Wow.
And then it becomes, why can't you hush and enjoy this moment? It's all of those things in that one little moment.
Yes.
And then it becomes, stop being so introspective. And so I'm being my own frenemy, because sometimes you just have to get out of your own head.
Yes.
And just enjoy the stage and the flowers and the applause.
There you go. Celebrate yourself. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the theme of self-love, which I try to practice as much as I can. And hopefully this will make sense to the other minors out there, because it's very personal to me. And this is my truth. Enemy, frenemy. I'm going to end with ally. Enemy, frenemy. Oh, unbothered. Oh, here we go. Yes. Being introspective and unbothered. So this is something we talked about earlier, but we didn't talk about it in this way. One of the things that we said at the very beginning of this discussion is my perspective as a Black male, right? And there are times when the Black male introspection in me says, listen, this don't have nothing to do with either being a Black man, or it don't have nothing to do with this Black man. Okay. There was an incident that happened at one of the award shows recently, and I'm not going to name a name, but there was an incident that happened at an award show, national television, with a Black man. Mm-hmm. And then I have to say to myself, okay, now let's go into introspection mode, right? What does this mean for me? How does this reflect on me as a person who's in a similar industry?
Right.
Right. Does it reflect on me as a person who is in the same age range? Does it reflect on me as a Black man, right? Because it was another Black man that this happened with, right? So then I say, if people see that, are they going to think that about me, right? That's the introspection, right? But that's where the introspection starts. That's the spiral. And then the unbothered part comes in. And the unbothered says, listen, I have a whole job. I have friends. I have a mother. I have about to be having a mortgage. I am unbothered. Like, this is not worth my energy, time. As a Black man, nah, this ain't for me. I'm just unbothered.
Right.
This will pass in a minute.
It sure would.
And then you move on.
Right. It'll be something else.
There's some things as a Black male, and I'm sure, and for my fellow minors, and you don't call them minorettes, they're all minors, but Black men and Black women alike. There are things that we don't need to be bothered with. We don't need to be introspective. We don't need to be going so hard on ourselves about, let's just, it's not worth being introspective about.
No.
And if we're going to be introspective about something as Black folks or my fellow minors in the universe, then be introspective and be the last thing, an ally. And there are things that we do need to be introspective and being an ally about. There are things happening as Black folks in America. If we are to continue our legacy or build a legacy for ourselves as a community or just our own individual selves, there are things that are happening that say, there are moments in our lives that we say, do we stand up for that? We saw that thing happen. Did I stand up for it? Did I make a difference? Did I make my voice heard? As a Black person, the introspection starts. Black man gets shot in the street, right? You hear about it on the news, right? Mm-hmm. You see it sometimes on video, unfortunately. And then the introspection starts. Mm-hmm. And you say, okay, how does this affect me, right? How do I feel about this? Damn what the rest of the world is thinking, right? Well, how do I feel about this? Could this affect me personally? And if it couldn't affect me personally or somebody in my general view or in my general sphere of a circle, what can I do about it? And even if it doesn't, right? It could just be stuff that you're doing for the world. But how much energy, introspection, how much energy am I going to allot for my own finite bucket of energy, right? Because we all are finite in that energy.
That's correct. That's right.
How much of my energy am I going to allot to this thing? And at times you might feel like you want to be unbothered, right? Because it's a lot. It's a lot. And then sometimes the unbothered becomes being an ally, because you say, you know what? There are different ways that I can stand up. There are different ways that I can contribute. And it's not all about contributing to a charity or going to a march. Sometimes it's about having a conversation.
That's right.
With your fellow miners, with the people who are listening, and with the people who matter to you in your very close circle.
Yes.
And so you're an ally in that space. You start with the introspection of, how does this affect me? Right? Does this matter? Should it matter? How much of my energy am I going to allot to it if it does matter? And then how can I be an ally? Is where I'd love to be. I started this by saying I am mostly my own worst enemy. And what I really love to be is my own best ally. I'd love to be in a space where I can pat myself on the back and say, you know what? You did the damn thing. Today, this week, this month. I wish that I could be there. And I'm trying. I really am trying. But, we all go through cycles. We all go through these cycles of introspection, and whether it's being an ally, being a frenemy, an enemy, or unbothered.
That's right.
We all go through. And the thing about that is that it's all a part of you. The thing that we started this with, and the thing I'm going to stop saying, and let the podcast person who's running this actually do it, is it's about self-love. It's about accepting all of those parts of you and not being ashamed to say, today I'm unbothered. Absolutely. Not being ashamed to say, today I'm my own enemy. Okay? Sometimes you can get there. You just need to know, you just need to identify it. And that's what I love about the identification. It's the ally, it's the frenemy, the enemy, and the unbothered. Thank you.
Yeah. You just summed that up, wrapped it in a nice little bow. I love it. But what I really love is how you are actually merging the ideas together, because it's correct, It's kind of like emotions. Emotions are typically never just one emotion, like you're just angry or you're just sad. There are other things that are mixed in there. And it's the same thing, with those 4 categories. You could be all 4 in a moment to yourself, yes. When you have that internal dialogue. So you bring up a good point. And before we move on, I did forget to mention something very important. The name of MarQuis' show is called So Here's the Thing. Yes, because he loves saying that. And he hasn't said it yet, but it's okay. Y'all might hear it in a few minutes. It'll come out naturally. And I was on that podcast, and I really appreciate, you having me on as your first guest. I had a good time. So you guys can go and take a listen to that. And as far as his contribution to the Black community, yes, he also invited me on for the second season as his co-host. Yes. And so I was able to do a few of the, episodes with him. And I'm very proud of it in the sense of the subject matter. And this goes back to contributing, to the Black community, which you brought up. And that's having a conversation, sharing a story with other people that look like you, to know that you're not the only one out there, and that's, also essentially what we're doing right now. Me as a Black woman, you as a Black man. I think even just us having...
You as a Black miner?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you as a Black miner.
Yes.
Us even having this space and talking, I think it only takes 2, right? Yep. It only takes 2. And so when you have like minds and you have people cooperating and working together in our race, and you just want this to build, right? And to me, that came across on your show. So I appreciate you having me on it as the co-host. And I think also just letting people have a platform to share their story as a Black person is very, very important, because you also mentioned something earlier about feeling alone. And I would imagine that, especially Black men, I got to tell you, I think that Black women and Black men, we have a lot of the same struggles, but we do have our differences because of gender. And, when I take the time to think outside of myself as much as I can about, a Black man's plight and what it could be in the United States of America, it really hurts my heart. Because I just feel like Black men are undervalued, underappreciated. They're not seen. They don't have the voice that they should. They're not able to stand in their manhood the same way in the United States of America unless they demand that. And with that demand, it comes, I'm sure, at some type of price. It's just, I could keep going. It's not easy. And then on top of it, you don't know what's going to happen when you walk out on some streets in the United States of America.
Can I say something very
quickly?
Please
do. Please.
I have two things I really wanted to touch on, but the second one is the more important. So I'm going to briefly touch on the first one. First, the other thing about doing this introspection is that sometimes it's unexpected. Sometimes, or you think that you're going to be unbothered by a thing. But it winds up being like you wind up being your own enemy because you probably should be bothered. You probably should like care one way or the other. So that's one. But two, it's about this thing that you were talking about, being alone as a Black man. And my view, particularly when you're talking about introspection, I talk about this with very, very few of my Black male friends because a lot of times they don't have the language, or a lot of times they are ashamed or there's a stigma about talking about introspection as a tool of mental health for Black men specifically. And I think that Black women have, I don't know if it's a fortune or my own perspective, is that Black women have a little bit of a leg up because they, to my mind, talk about their own mental health with each other. Black women to
we're
Black women.
That's what women, yes, absolutely. Right. That's one of the major differences. Yes. Right. Go ahead.
So as a Black man, I could be talking to somebody about my introspection, frenemy, enemy, ally, unbothered, but they may not have the same emotional language or understanding to be able to fully engage in it, or they're ashamed that they don't do it themselves. So now I have to sort of shy away from making them feel uncomfortable because they're like, well, damn, you really are, you deep. I don't even think about that. And I'm like, well, it's not like, hey, maybe you should. It's a fine line because you don't want to make your Black brother like ashamed for not being able to express themselves.
Right.
But you also want to provide an example of, hey, this is okay to do. It's okay. You should examine yourself and talk about your self-examination with others.
Yes.
It's free.
Yes, it is.
So that's it. Those were the two things.
I love that because, even in that exchange with another Black man, I think that it lets that man know that it's possible because you're doing it.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's why I share it. That's why I tell these, my friends. But I'm selective with who I can share that with. Because there is a certain vulnerability with it.
Right.
And I can't be vulnerable with every Black man I meet. I just can't.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
Because and Black man, Black woman person, you can't be vulnerable with every person.
That's the truth.
So you have to sort of pick and choose, not who can handle it, but who can hear it.
Amen. Amen to that. Yeah. And that's where that intuition kicks in. Go ahead.
Minor? I was just asking Minor if he agreed.
It seems Minor does. Yes. What I'd love to get into is, without you so much sharing, let's say, a specific story, because you gave us some great examples. Thank you for that, because that gives context, right? And you are a storyteller. Yes, you are. Yeah. So I think it would be nice to know, like, can you give us an example of how you purposefully do introspection?
Okay.
Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I pray that you build your relationship with God, love yourself unconditionally, and put in the work to mine, refine, and shine those gems.